Last time on Guns and Glitter, Grace confronted Keera about stealing all of her clients for the day. To make up for it, Keera offered to let Grace come along on a house call that she had planned for later that night. Grace reluctantly agreed to go. Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepki, and today I am sharing part 12 of my story, Guns and Glitter. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification button so you'll know when the next episode comes out. The house was completely dark when Grace and Keera got out of the Uber. The neighborhood looked mostly abandoned, with boards covering windows and the occasional car out in front of derelict houses, with yards overburdened by children's toys and stripped-down vehicles. Every instinct Grace had warned her not to go near that house. But the Uber was already paid for and gone, and Keera strode confidently toward the 2-story death trap. I don't like this. Grace didn't move from the sidewalk. She clung to her duffel bag full of all her worldly possessions. I thought you said they were rich guys. Why would they be at a place like this? Maybe they bought the place to get away from their wives. Keera didn't look concerned. There aren't any lights on. It doesn't look like anyone's home. That's because the party's in the basement. Keera glanced back at Grace, who crossed her arms protectively over her chest. Keera groaned. Come on, Grace, stop being so stubborn. I've danced at worse places than this, trust me. We're gonna go in there, let them ogle the goods for an hour, and spend tomorrow snorting our good fortune. When Grace didn't smile, Keera sighed. I promise, it's not a big deal. I thought you needed the money. I did. I do. But I also want to live to see 30. Sugar, there's no guarantee that wish will come true whether you go inside that house or not. You may as well live a little. If we get raped and murdered, my ghost is going to haunt your ghost until the end of time. I hope you know that. Grace uncrossed her arms and allowed Keera to drag her forward around the side of the house and to the small staircase that led downward to a grimy wooden door. Keera knocked, then leaned luxuriously against the door frame. Whoever let her in was in for a treat. Beguiling didn't even begin to describe the enigma that was Karma the stripper. At the club, Keera was the most charming of all the girls when she felt like it. When she didn't feel like it, she acted like a dominatrix, which was admittedly just as entertaining to watch. It didn't take Grace long to realize why she got the name Karma. As the saying goes, so she was. Who is it? The voice on the other side of the door was gruff and hypermasculine. To Grace's refined ears, it sounded like the kind of man who wanted people to think he was tougher than he really was. Special delivery, Keera purred. Light spilled out from a crack in the door as an average-sized man in a white A-shirt peeked out. There was only supposed to be one of you. Who's this? A friend. You paid extra, so I thought I'd give you a special treat. She winked and licked her lips. Grace watched her do it and nearly laughed. Only someone like Keera could pull off such an awkward come-on. The door swung wide. Yeah, okay. The stout man blushed, eyes roving up and down Keira's body with something like reverence. Come on in. Keera pulled Grace over the threshold along with her, fingers locked together loosely. Grace peered around her friend's shoulder at the nasty basement that didn't look any better than the house that sat on top of it. Loose beams overhead looked half-rotten. 2 doorways off to the side were padlocked shut, and a nasty smell emanated from one of them. Beer bottles and weed littered a dinged-up coffee table in front of a lumpy couch where 2 men who were covered from face to fingertips and beyond in tattoos sat. A mustard-colored recliner off to the side held an especially fat man with the world's tiniest mustache. Against another wall, one more man, with gold chains and a bright red bandana tied around his head, watched Keera and Grace with a predatory grin. "So who's the birthday boy?" Keera untied her thin jacket and dropped it to the ground. "Or did you want us to give you a show first?" She raised Grace's fingers gently to her lips, then licked the back of her hand. Grace squeaked. Keera raised an eyebrow. "Really, sugar? I don't like being licked. Give me a break." The man on the love seat laughed. "What do you think, boys? Should we get a show before we get down to business?" "I wouldn't mind." The fat man on the recliner leaned forward. "I call dibs on the little one." Grace closed her eyes and breathed out through her nose. Men were gross. Seriously gross. A few weeks working at a strip club had her ready to swear off men forever. Even the nice ones mostly just wanted to touch her boobs. The man who opened the door for them shut it and latched the bolt. "You remember what the boss said, Evan?" He glanced at Grace and Keera, then quickly looked away. Goose flesh rose along Grace's arms and neck. She didn't like the way the men were talking. She took a step back and held her duffel bag protectively in front of her as she tried to pull Keera away from the men by the hand she still held. "Keera..." The 2 men on the couch stood up. Grace tugged at her friend's hand, but Keera hadn't quite caught up with the situation. One of the men lunged at Grace, who backpedaled and fell onto the ground with her duffel bag wedged underneath her. Keera turned when Grace fell, but the man in the bandana leapt from the love seat and grabbed her around the shoulders, locking her arms in place as she screamed and flailed her legs. The fat man slowly got up from the recliner and shoved a sock into Keira's mouth before he grappled with her feet. The man who lunged at Grace scrambled back to his feet and reached for her again as she kicked at him and tried to crawl away. The young doorman helped him corner her next to the door that smelled like a sewer. She hastily unzipped the side pocket of her duffel bag and reached inside. 3 of the men were on top of Keera, trying to hold her down. Years of stripper pole acrobatics made her stronger than she looked. She shoved one of the men away and started beating a second man around his neck and shoulders. But then the red bandana man punched her in the head once, then twice. The fat man rammed his knee into her ribs, driving the air from her lungs. She went completely limp. "No!" Grace shoved her duffel bag at the man who roughly grabbed her shoulder. She gripped Carter's pistol with both hands and aimed it at the doorman. He froze, shocked. Trembling violently, Grace pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. She tried to remember what Carter said as she fumbled with the gun. There was a button on the side, if she recalled correctly. She hit the button, but the magazine released. The man in the red bandana stood and laughed. He started walking toward Grace. Tears streaked down her face as she loaded the magazine back in and cocked the gun. The bandana man reached behind his back to pull something out of his jeans. Grace's fingers fumbled on the second button. Shaking violently, she aimed at the bandana man's chest, closed her eyes, and squeezed the trigger. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Guns and Glitter. I hope you like the story so far. If this is your first time watching and you like what you heard, then make sure to go back and check out the story from the beginning. I'll post the link in the description. This is a continuing story, and I plan to share the entire thing with you on a weekly basis until the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification button so you'll know when the next episode comes out. Till next time, see you later.